Hey, I'm Nick Kalikas. Welcome to the show where you get first look at the latest odds before they hit the sportsbooks.
And I'm Miguel Iturrate.
This is the place for a unique look at MMA from a gambler's perspective.
And this is MMA Oddsbreaker. Welcome to the show. Nick Kalikas alongside Miguel Iturrate.
On today's show, we're going to look at UFC 154 for starters. The long-awaited return of champion George St. Pierre as he takes on interim champion Carlos Condit to unify the titles in the welterweight division. We're going to look at the odds for that fight and one fight more from that special card coming up in mid-November.
And on today's Oddsbreaker segment, my guests will be Adam Martin and Greg Delong. Both guys will help me break 4 original odds that have not hit the sportsbooks yet.
Well, Nick, let's jump right in. UFC 154, the return of George St. Pierre taking on Carlos Condit. A hugely exciting fight. Nick, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm just as curious as everybody else to see the return of GSP, to see if he's in the same form that he was before the injury, before the time off, you know, if there's going to be a little bit of rust there. Because if he is close to 100%, the dominant George St. Pierre that we have seen before in the past, I think that he's going to be a very difficult matchup for Carlos Condit. He should be able to dictate where the fight goes, put him on his back, and basically at least control, maybe even get a late stoppage. It's going to be tough to stop a guy like Condit, though, for sure. So I'm leaning a little bit more towards decision here for GSP. The current price is kind of tough to bet, though. You're looking at DSI right now. He's minus 345. The comeback around plus 275 for Condit. So it's kind of a stay away from me fight. It's almost bet dog or pass. Again, it depends on how GSP shows up for this fight here. So for me, I am leaning towards him a little bit, but it's hard to bet this fight. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a huge fight for the UFC for many, many reasons. If GSP wins, you know, maybe you move him on to fight Anderson Silva. You have a backlog behind both these guys for the next contender. You've got Martin Kampman, you've got Damian Maia, you've got Jake Ellenberger, you've got a lot of exciting fights that you can make there. There's probably 6 or 7 guys in that weight class that might be the next challenger. So it's very exciting to see how this hashes out. Obviously, if Condit wins, you probably have to give GSP a rematch right away. He's probably, you know, he's more than earned it. But I tend to lean towards GSP in this fight for the reasons that we know. I mean, the bottom line is GSP's been a dominant fighter for the last, you know, half decade at least. And one of the reasons he is a dominant fighter is his preparation, his mindset, his whole acumen in the gym. And he's an amazing guy like that, and I don't see him coming back, you know, at less than 90%, say, than where he was before. And that's a tall order for Carlos Condit.
And I got to say, I'm a little surprised because you're probably the biggest GSP critic, I think I know, as far as not being able to finish a fight, can't finish a Happy Meal type of thing. So a little surprised you're backing GSP here.
There's a little of the fries and a bite of the sandwich. He doesn't finish fights. It's been a knock on him, and once he's ahead in a fight, he gets himself into a safe mode and kind of coasts. I don't like to see that. We used to see that in John Fitch. John Fitch showed me a different angle on that in a recent fight. I'd love to see more out of George St. Pierre. The bottom line is coming back off of this injury, if he comes back and wins and is dominant the way he was, he deserves nothing but credit.
Okay, let's move on to the other welterweight bout, a co-main event between Johnny Hendricks and Martin Kampman. Now, of course, this is a big fight for both guys, a lot at stake here, potentially a future matchup with GSP. I opened this fight at pick 'em minus 115 around either way. Now, the betting public and some sharp action coming in a little bit more on Johnny Hendricks is minus 135, the comeback plus 105 at BetDSI. Give me your thoughts first.
It's an interesting fight. I like the fight a lot. I don't know if betting against Martin Kampman is a good idea here because I think Kampman's a more complete fighter. I think he's got more outs in the fight. I think he's got a great stand-up game. I think his length and physicality match up well with Hendricks, who's stocky. He's going to have to work to get in and get in his big punch. And Kampman's a winner as well. Kampman's been winning fights. And I'd like to see him get a little bit better. You know, keep betting Hendricks. You know, send those odds up. I'm going to bet Kampman all the way.
Yeah, you know, it's tough for me too. I'm going kind of back and forth on this fight. I do see why the betting public is coming in a little bit more on Johnny Hendricks. I mean, he does have the wrestling pedigree. He has the knockout power, and we have seen Martin Kampman get caught a few times, and every fight get rocked a little bit. So, I mean, that could steal some rounds just alone. If he gets caught once per round, gets rocked, even if he doesn't get TKO'd. So that's a reason on the wrestling department, again, he's going to have the edge over Kampman, but not a huge edge. I think Kampman's tough to take down. He scrambles back up to the feet well, and he does have a submission edge. So technically speaking, Martin Kampman is the better fighter. I do agree with you. It's hard to bet where the odds are. If the betting public continues to bet Johnny Hendricks up, there's probably some value in a small play worth on Martin Kampman. But right now, where the odds are, it's another fight that you kind of have to pass.
It's an interesting fight in that this may decide who faces Condit or GSP for the title next up, especially if GSP doesn't go to an Anderson Silva fight. But when we come back in the Oddsbreaker segment, Nick's going to break some more odds from this UFC 154 card. Stay tuned.
All right, time to introduce both of our guests for today's Oddsbreaker segment. First, making his MMA Oddsbreaker show debut, a talented MMA journalist, Adam Martin. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
Also making his show debut, from Inside the Cage Radio, the host, Greg Delong. Greg, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Nick.
Okay, now both of you guys are new to the show, so let me quickly explain how it works. Our sponsored sportsbook BetDSI has donated a $5K bankroll. Both of you guys get to pick 4 fights and bet $500 either on the favorite or the underdog. Now, the bankroll applies for the first 3 fights. The bonus fight, it does not apply. Guys, I brought you on today's show to help me break the 3 remaining UFC 154 pay-per-view fights. Starting off first, it's a middleweight bout between Tom Lawlor and Francis Carmont. Guys, we're going to start off with Adam first. I'm going to open Carmont the favorite, minus 220. The comeback is going to be plus 170. Give me your take and give me your bet.
I'm going to take Francis Carmont in this fight. I think he has a very good chance of winning it. I've been very impressed with him in the UFC. He's 3-0. Beat some tough guys, Chris Camozzi, Carlos Vemola. So he's a guy that's rapidly improving and training at TriStar Gym with George St. Pierre, who's been raving about this guy for years. I mean, he's 31 years old now. He really is in the prime of his fighting career. I think he's a really big guy for the division, 6'3". He has a 78-inch reach. He's going to have the hometown edge, considering he is from, fighting out of Montreal, and the fight's going to take place there. And I just don't see any ways Tom Lawlor can win this fight. I just don't see him taking Francis down. Francis has a 92% takedown defense rate, so I just don't see Tom Lawlor winning this fight at all. I think Francis is going to take him down, grind him out, and either win into decision or get the submission. At minus 220, he's a great bet.
Okay, so Adam Martin confident in Carmont here at minus 220. It's going to be $1,100 to win $500. Let's throw it over to Greg. Greg, what do you think about this fight?
Well, I actually thought the spread should have been a little bit larger. Francis Carmont, I think, has every aspect of the game. I think he is stronger. You may say the wrestling, I guess, would be Lawlor. But again, just like Adam said, I don't see Lawlor being able to take this fight and grind it out. Carmont has too much athleticism. His stand-up is great. You get it to the ground. His submissions are strong. And he's a guy that is on the rise. Lawlor's a guy that's been around a while. And by his nickname, Filthy, that's what he would want to do with this fight. But I don't see him being able to grind out a decision in this, and that's the only way I could see him winning. And I truthfully think that at minus 220, Carmont's actually a little bit undervalued here. So you're getting a good value by taking the minus 220.
Okay, so Greg does also agree with Adam. He's taken Francis Carmont at minus 220, $1,100 to win $500. So both of our experts agree that Francis Carmont is going to defeat Tom Lawlor at UFC 154. Okay, guys, another middleweight bout here from UFC 154. Great fight. They just recently moved it to the main card between Nick Ring and Constantinos Philippou. Guys, we're going to start off with Greg this time first. I'm going to open up Philippou as the favorite, minus 225, the comeback plus 175. Greg, give me your take and give me your bet.
Hey, my take on this fight is this should be closer to a pick'em fight. Nick Ring, his only defeat is to a guy, Tim Bosch, that is in line, for a potential title shot. Defeated Yushin Okami, defeated Hector Lombard. So that is the only loss that Ring has. And although Constantinos Philippou has looked good in his last fights, he's on a 4-fight win streak. He's looked very solid. I'm taking Nick Ring in this fight. I think he's a huge value. Again, I think this fight should be a pick'em. And by the, getting a plus 175, I'm going with Nick Ring on this.
Okay, so Greg is going to take the underdog here. Nick Ring plus 175 does find value. Excellent points made here. It's going to be $500 to win $875. Let's throw it over to Adam. Adam, what are your thoughts on this fight?
when the fight was first announced, my initial reaction was I think Costa Philippou is going to win. But after watching tape and doing more research on this, I agree with Greg. I got Nick Ring in this fight, and at plus 175, I think you're getting good value there. The thing about Ring is the judges just really seem to like his style, and he's always in really super competitive fights. Like Greg said, his only losses to Tim Boetsch, and he lost that fight 29-28 and 2 judges' cards. So, he was a round away from beating Tim Boetsch, who's a top 5 guy in the division. He had the win over Ricky Fukuda. I don't think anyone scored that fight for him except for the judges, but it doesn't matter because the judges liked him in that fight. And same with the Court McGee fight, another very close fight that the judges gave it to him. So I think the key for this fight is that Nick Ring just he's very he likes moving a lot, and he just likes to circle around his opponents and throw leg kicks and throw punches. And Costa Philippou, he has so much power in his hands. He has such great boxing, but he's not aggressive enough, and he doesn't use his hands to his advantage. So the key to this fight, in my opinion, is the fact that Nick Ring is landing over half a strike more per minute, and I think those strikes are going to add up, and I think the judges at the end of the day are going to give him a unanimous decision.
Okay, so Adam Martin also agrees. He's going with the plus money, plus 175. It's going to be 500 to win 875 on the underdog, Nick Ring here. Both of our experts, again, make great points, saying take the dog money at UFC 154 in this middleweight bout. All right, guys, change of pace here, but we are sticking to UFC 154. This time it's a featherweight bout between the struggling Mark Hominick and Pablo Garza, kind of struggling himself as well here. I'm going to open up Hominick as the favorite, minus 260. The comeback's going to be plus 200 on Garza. We'll throw it over to Adam first on this fight. What are your thoughts?
A couple fights ago, minus 250 and Hominick would have been a steal. I mean, he was so highly favored against both the Korean Zombie and Eddie Yagin, and yeah, he lost both those fights. So, Hominick has so many question marks surrounding him right now. I mean, he's lost 3 in a row. He's been knocked out in 7 seconds. He got knocked down twice by Eddie Yagin, so he's incredibly chinny right now. And I just don't trust him completely. But Pablo Garza is another guy that's I don't know what happened to him. He had so much potential. He had that flying knee knockout on Fredson Paixão. He had the flying triangle choke submission on Yusuf Brand. And then since then, he's just been a dud. He looked terrible against Dustin Poirier. And he looked even worse against Dennis Bermudez. So, he's another guy I can't trust. And he's a guy that lost to Tien Zhang in the WEC. So, Pablo Garza, he does have the length and the reach, and he's a tall guy. He's very unorthodox, but I just don't see him beating Mark Hominick. I think Hominick's going to win this fight. I do think he'll knock out Garza, but at minus 250, and for a guy that's lost 3 fights in a row, it's just not a good bet. For purposes of the show, though, I will take Mark Hominick. Okay,
so cautiously, Adam Martin's going to go with the favorite here at minus 260. It's going to be $1,300 to win $500. Let's throw it over to Greg. Greg, what are your thoughts on this fight?
Well, you have 2 fighters here that are both on losing streaks, both potentially, Hominick obviously on a 3-fight losing streak. And having a 3-fight losing streak in the UFC is never a positive for job security. And you have Garza that if he loses this fight will be on a 3-fight losing streak. I think Hominick, if he goes back to the Hominick that was in the Jose Aldo, he gets the 7-second knockout loss to the Korean Zombie. Of course, the loss of his coach, Sean Tompkins. There's a lot of effect going on there. We've seen it's going to be now, about a year and a half since his loss to Aldo. He's had the loss of Sean Tompkins. Hopefully, he's turned things around. In his last loss, it was at least a fight of the night performance, and I think we're going to see Mark Hominick start to get back to the Mark Hominick that we knew that earned the title shot. And I don't think Pablo Garza is the type of guy that's going to get in his way. I mean, yes, Hominick has losses, but let's look at him. Jose Aldo on a decision and a flash knockout against another top title contender. He's fought better competition, and I don't see, obviously it's MMA and anything can happen, but I don't see a way that Pablo Garza gets through Mark Hominick, and especially not up in Montreal.
Okay, so Greg also confident that Hominick does bounce back in this fight. Laying the juice, minus 260. It's going to be $1,300 to win $500. So once again, our experts do agree. Mark Hominick beats Pablo Garza at UFC 154. All right, guys, time for today's bonus fight. It's a big one in the UFC light heavyweight division. It's a rumored bout at UFC 157 between Antonio Rogerio Nogueira and Rashad Evans. Now, I'm going to start off with Greg first on this one. Both guys very talented light heavyweights, but I am going to open Rashad, the decent favorite, minus 345. The comeback on Nogueira is going to be plus 265. Give me your take. Give me your bet.
All right, well, it's Rashad Evans all the way. Let's look at the last 4 fights that Nogueira has had. He had a split decision win against Jason Burrows, who had a wrestling background, took the fight on short notice, and in a lot of people's mind won that fight. He has losses to Ryan Bader and Phil Davis. He did have a victory over Tito Ortiz. And you could say Tito has a wrestling background, but obviously was on the downward side of his career. So Rashad Evans is a former champion. He's more explosive than Ryan Bader is, has the wrestling background, very athletic, similar in the athleticism to a Phil Davis. And Nogueira's kryptonite is wrestlers, but Rashad can still stand and throw punches with them. He hits hard. Nogueira's kryptonite, the wrestler, and I see him, falling to another defeat on this. And I think the odds are right on there because Nogueira, as soon as I heard this fight was announced, I'm like, man, he's getting another wrestler. He's going to be a huge underdog.
All right, so valid points once again made by Greg here. He is going to go with the favorite, Rashad Evans, minus 345. So it's going to be $17.25 to win $500. Adam, what do you think about Evans versus Nogueira?
Yeah, Evans is the pick in this fight for sure. I just think that, again, Nogueira is a very talented fighter, but it's just a bad matchup for him stylistically. Like Greg said, I mean, he's looked pretty bad against the last couple wrestlers he's fought, and Evans is a better wrestler than probably any of those guys. So I think that with Evans, with his takedowns and wrestling ability, with his knockout power, with his boxing, and Nogueira does have good boxing too, don't get me wrong, but I just think that Evans is just going to be too much for him. And he's a little younger too, so he has that advantage as well. I mean, if the fight does hit the ground, Nogueira can definitely threaten off his back. There's no question about it, but I just think that, with Nogueira's inactivity, he hasn't fought in over a year now, combined with just the style matchup, I think Evans will win this fight, and he's a very safe play in a parlay.
Okay, so Adam is going to lay the juice here on Rashad Evans as well. A lot of great points made. It's going to be $17.25 to win $500 on Rashad Evans. Both of our experts do agree Rashad Evans over Nogueira at UFC 157. Stay tuned for what Miguel and I have to say during our odds adjustment segment. All right, both first-timers here on the Oddsbreaker segment, but you both did an outstanding job, so definitely going to have you back on down the road. Before we do let you go, I want to take a minute and let you guys both plug your websites or whatever you got going on. Let's start off with Adam first.
Yeah, well, check me out at MMAOddsbreaker.com. I'm working there now, so check me out there. And, go to my Twitter at MMAdamMartin. And thanks, Nick and Miguel, for having me on.
All right, Adam, thank you. And Greg, what about you?
All right, check out InsideTheCageRadio.com. My show is 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday and Thursday Pacific Standard Time. Also now there's going to be select post-fight shows after usually the big numbered events and like a UFC on Fox. And you can follow me on Twitter at GregIsOldSchool. And again, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it and look forward to coming back on again sometime.
All right, we'll see you both down the road.
Welcome back to the show. Coming out of another hot Oddsbreaker segment are two special guests, Adam Martin and Greg Delong. They're rookies here at the Oddsbreaker show, but they're clearly old hat when it comes to betting this MMA stuff. Nick, great guests.
Yeah, that's exactly why I wanted to bring both guys on. They did a fantastic job. Greg, I had the opportunity to be on his show before, and we've talked a little bit off the air about MMA betting and the sport in general, so I knew he knew his stuff. And Adam Martin, he's now a contributor for MMAOddsbreaker.com. I know he knows the sport well, and of course he knows MMA gambling, so great guest to have on. But let's get started with the odds adjustment segment.
Yep, Nick, I noticed that they all agreed on the 4 fights that you gave them, which means you are going to have to adjust these odds. Nick, why don't you take people through that thought process?
Well, typically when you do see a fresh line hit the sports book, when a max bet or two does come in, you'll see some movement early on. So we're going to take that same principle, same philosophy, and put it into play during our odds adjustment segment here. Now, starting off with the first fight, it was a middleweight bout between Francis Carmont and Tom Lawlor. Now, from UFC 154, actually, 3 of the 4 fights from today's Oddsbreaker segment are from 154, but this one, the middleweight battle, I opened Carmont minus 220. The comeback was plus 170. Both guys did come in on that side, so they laid the juice at minus 220. I have to adjust the line a little bit. When it does hit the sports books now, the new number is going to be minus 240. The comeback is going to be plus 180 in favor of Carmont. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to come in on Carmont as well in this fight. I think he's a more complete fighter. I think his physicality, his length, and his ability to fight on the ground and standing up are both have been improving a great deal in his most recent performances. I think this is now his 4th or 5th UFC fight, something along those lines. He's been there before. Whatever jitters there are going to be gone, and this guy is going to be a dangerous fighter.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you here. I have nothing but respect for Carmont. I have seen all the improvement in his game, man. The guy has legit grappling. His striking continues to improve, and he's dangerous on the feet. But the grappling aspect, I mean, he manages to transition well, scramble back up to his feet, or put the other guy in a dangerous position, get on top. So nothing but impressed with him. But we cannot count out Tom Lawlor here. I mean, the guy's definitely got some improving stand-up on his own. We know his wrestling pedigree is legit, too, so he's going to look for the takedown. His stand-up's improved enough. He does have some knockout power, as we've seen recently, too. On the feet. So, but I think overall that the side is going to be Carmont. A tough one to bet where the line is right now, especially 2.5 to 1, in case you do see the lay and pray type of style come into play here with Tom Lawlor. But I do think he's going to get struggle and probably get caught. Okay, let's look at the next fight. Another middleweight bout from 154. Constantinos Philippou minus 225. The comeback on Nick Ring plus 175. That was my opener. Once again, this time they came in on the dog though. But both of our experts did agree Nick Ring was a side. Off camera, I know you're favoring that side a little bit too. I am going to have to make the adjustment here. It's going to hit the sports books at minus 210 now for Philippou. The comeback on Nick Ring is going to be plus 160. So a slight adjustment towards the dog, towards the experts, and towards yourself. What are your quick thoughts?
I've known about Nick Ring for a long time. The first time he made an appearance on the international scene was in the Abu Dhabi trials that occurred in Canada, in Kelowna, a long time ago, 2003 or something along those lines. And he's been in the game ever since, been trained by Matt Hume and some other very, very good people. I have a lot of faith in him because what he showed that first time out was that he was game. The guy's a fighter. Not that Constantine isn't, but the bottom line is I trust Nick Ring in this fight.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that as well. I think it is going to be a very competitive fight. Both guys are hard to finish. They're both tough guys. So if it goes to decision, I think it's going to be very, very interesting. I opened this line a little bit more towards the favor of Philippou than I should have. It sounds like I opened it a little bit too high, obviously. But I think the public perception a little bit more for Nick Ring is he's kind of got lucky in his decisions. I mean, they've been controversial, but he has won the decisions. Adam pointed that out as well. So the judges do like to see Nick Ring's style. For some reason, he does stay active on the feet, too, a little bit more active than Philippou. So I can understand all that, too. But I think the general public respects Philippou a little bit more, so that's why I opened it maybe a little bit too high here. I do think we'll probably see the line continue to drop a little bit, but then by fight day, climb back up, because I think some of that hype is going to come back on Philippou here, but it's going to be interesting to see where it's at. Okay, let's move on to the third fight. Now, this time it's a featherweight battle. Hominick versus Pablo Garza. Both guys struggling a little bit. It was honestly a tough line to set because Hominick had a lot of hype coming in before his 3 losses in a row here. So tough to me to really gauge how the public's going to respect him or not. Now, he should have several advantages in this fight. My opener was minus 260. The comeback on Garza was plus 200. Both of the experts did come in, but cautiously, we have to say that, on Mark Hominick, but they did lay the juice. I'm going to have to adjust the line a little bit now. The new line is going to be minus 275, the comeback on Garza plus 215. Give me your quick thoughts, Miguel.
If ever there was a fighter in the UFC that has to get himself back on track, it's Mark Hominick. He went to 5 rounds with Jose Aldo, a dominant champion, and came out of that fight, despite taking a loss, came out of that fight on top of the world, a hero. And he's taken 2 losses that have been very, derailed his career, basically. He needs a win. He's fighting at home. Hey, basically, Mark, you got to decide right now. Do you want to walk in and tell people you used to fight for the UFC or that you still do? Because that's what this fight's about.
Yeah, and I hope he does get back on track because you know what the truth is, Mark Hominick's been such a great fighter. If you look back at his career, he's been in so many tremendous fights. The guy's very talented. On the other hand, Garza needs a win bad here. I mean, if he loses this fight to Hominick, he's probably cut. He's coming off 2 losses in a row himself, so both these guys really have a lot of pressure on him. It's hard to bet this fight because, I mean, what we've seen recently from Mark Hominick's chin, it's kind of hard to bet on a guy or lay 2.5 to 1 or more on that fight. But at the same time, I think he does have the advantages. So it's hard to bet also on Garza and put the money down on Garza because realistically, you should see Mark Hominick win the fight.
A lot of what I said about Mark Hominick can also apply to Garza. They're both under pressure in this fight. Could make for a great fight. But Hominick's the guy that really has to come through here. Hominick's the guy that was on the cusp of another title shot and maybe can make it back there,
Yeah, I really do hope Hominick does get back on track at UFC 154. But let's move on to the bonus fight from today's Oddsbreaker segment. A light heavyweight bout between Antonio Rogerio Nogueira, Little Nog, versus Rashad Evans. I opened up Rashad Evans as a decent favor, minus 345, the comeback plus 265 on Nogueira. Both of our experts agreed that Rashad Evans is the side. Let's get Miguel's quick thoughts.
Yeah, I think just Rashad Evans, his trajectory on his career is still, heading upwards. He's still younger, fresher fighter. And Rogerio's always had trouble not only with wrestlers but with better athletes, and Rashad's a way better athlete. Rashad's going to be able to control where this fight goes back and forth. He's going to be able to nullify Rogerio's game, which is basically to be methodical and precise and come at you and grind you out. That doesn't work with Rashad. Rashad is going to be able to stick and move if he has to for the 3 to 5 rounds.
Yeah, I agree with all of you guys, too. I think it's Rashad Evans' fight to win or lose here. I'm going to adjust the line a little bit. Minus 360 is going to be the new line when it does hit the sports books. Come back on Nog, plus 280. I think it's a fair price, and I think the betting public's going to think so as well. With parlays, we could see the line escalate even higher, maybe some straight bets back on Nogueira coming back in by fight day, could see it drop, but I think it's going to stay ballpark between 3 and 4 to 1. It's probably a pretty good spot, but another tough fight to bet because you really don't want to lay that much juice against a talented fighter like Nogueira, but realistically, Rashad Evans should win the fight.
Well, thanks for joining us. That's it for another episode of MMA Oddsbreakers. You can look for the odds that Nick broke right here on the show to start popping up at the sport books throughout the coming week. And a big special thanks to our 2 guests, Adam Martin and Greg Delong. Thanks for joining us, guys. Great job.
And if you haven't checked out our site yet, make sure you head over to MMAOddsbreaker.com. A lot of betting picks, previews, and much, much more. And also follow us on Twitter at MMA Oddsbreaker. For Miguel Iturrate, I'm Nick Kalikas saying until next time, enjoy the fights.